Dear students, this is Dr. Sadasivam, the Faculty of History from the Institute of Bureaucracy. For today's lecture, we are going to discuss regarding the political condition during a Vedic age. In ancient Indian history, so after the prehistory and the proto-historic cultures, then we are entering into the Vedic age here. So this period is very important in terms of understanding the political evolution of ancient India. So in this, we are going to look at the different aspects regarding the political institutions or the political life of a Vedic age people. So the Vedic age starts around 1500 BCE. So the Vedic age goes on up to 600 BCE. Generally, we divide the Vedic age into early Vedic age and later Vedic age. So the early Vedic age starts around 1500 BCE and it ends 1000 BCE. So the later Vedic age starts around 1000 BCE and it ends around 600 BC here. This period is unique. Why we are actually dividing it into early Vedic and the later Vedic here? Because of that, the geographical extent that the Rig Vedic people did, or the geographical expansion of the Rig Vedic people during this period. So based on that, we are dividing it into the early Vedic and the later Vedic. In early Vedic, the people mostly settled in Indus and its 5 tributaries region. Means the Sapta Sindhava region, they mostly settled. But the later Vedic age, we can look at the expansion from the Sapta Sindhava region towards the western part of Uttar Pradesh. Okay, so the Ganges regions actually, they started to move here. So in this kind of a movement from the early Vedic to the later Vedic age produced a lot of changes in the political scenario of the Vedic people. So in this, we are going to look at how the political condition of the Vedic age people, specifically in the early Vedic age and the later Vedic age. So that is what we are going to see in detail for this class. First, we will look at some of the important aspects regarding the Vedic age here. In order to understand about the Vedic age, the literatures helping us a lot to understand. In this, the Rig Vedic age, specifically for the Rig Vedic age or the Rig Veda, is actually one of the important literature to understand more about the early Vedic age here, because that is the only literature we can identify during early Vedic age here. Okay, in this, when we come across that Rig Vedic literature, it gives us the early Vedic polity was more tribal in nature. Okay, the tribal chief was responsible in the political and administrative system of the early Vedic people here. Okay, then the most important thing regarding any monarchical form of a government, if you look at very carefully here, the state system is very important in terms of a territory and other things and all, very important in the monarchical form of a government. But here, the concept of state was absent during an early Vedic period here because of that character of a tribal in nature. Okay, then that is actually very important during this time here. So because the people moving from from the Saptasindhava region to the other areas very gradually. It's been almost 1,000 years from the 1500 to 1000, the early Vedic period, and then you can see that from 1000 to it goes on to the 600. So in this, the early Vedic period, the people mostly settled in this region. So it was more on, we can identify the state system was absent. Then the another important character during this period is actually regarding the political institutions existed during this period. We can see the democratic elements which actually present there through these political institutions. Some of the political institutions, if you look at Sabha, Samiti, Vidata, Gana, and Parishad. So these 5 political institutions are very essential during a time of a Vedic age. Each council had an exclusive role to play here. Okay, so which makes how democratically vibrant the early Vedic people, which shows that. Okay, and more importantly, both men and women participated in all these assemblies, specifically for the Sabha and Samiti. Sabha and Samiti, both men and women participated in this. So the representation of the women in this political institutions are very prominent, and we can identify through the literary evidence. And more importantly, the political institutions during this time, or the political system during the time of early Vedic age, if you look at very carefully, it was more on liberal, progressive, and egalitarian in character. That is actually one of the 3 unique characteristics of the early Vedic age political system of, early Vedic age political system. Then how was the political institutions evolved gradually? So from the family, it starts. Okay, a family was considered as the first political level or the first political unit from the bottom. Okay, then it was the person is actually, the family is actually called a Kula, and the head of the family is actually called Kulapa. So the political institution which actually starts from there. Okay, then a group of families comprised, and we used to call it as Grama. So the Gramani was the in charge of Grama. Then many Gramas actually combined together, and it is called a Vish. So the in charge of that Grama, so many Gramas is actually Vishapati. Okay, then there are a lot of Vish actually combined, and it is to be called as Jana. So the person actually in charge of that is actually Janasaya. He is actually equivalent to the present position of a king. Okay, equivalent to the present position of a king. How king actually enjoyed the privileges, the similar pattern we can identify. Okay, that's actually so. It starts with the family, then it comes for a Grama, then it comes for a Vish, then it comes for a Jana. So this is actually the political system. We can see that political stratification we can see during this time here. And the next important thing regarding the early Vedic political age is actually both a monarchical and a republican form of a government we can identify. But the most important component here regarding the monarchical and the republican thing is actually more liberal in nature. It was not like what we are looking after the Vedic age here. It's a more systematized approach regarding the republican or the monarchical form of care. So it's in longer run, it actually continued here. Then the next important thing is actually here in the beginning of the early Vedic age, we could see the king was mostly selected by the institutions, the Sabha and Samiti, or mostly the Samiti. It was elected by a Samiti. But later it was converted into a hereditary basis here. Only a certain family members actually holding that position here. These are actually the major characteristics of a early Vedic age we can identify. Then we'll move on to the later Vedic age here. So how the transformations that happen during a later Vedic age, that's very important. So references regarding the later Vedic age, we can treat the more number of literatures actually available, like Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharvaveda, Brahmanas, Aryankas, and these literary evidences and all, giving us very detailed description about the political condition or the changes that occurred during the later Vedic age. So later Vedic age, we can identify the people started to settle in the present-day Uttar Pradesh and the Western Ganges, Western Ganges side actually, they mostly settled here. So when the people migrated from the moved from the Sapta Sindhava region to and this locality, which made a tremendous transformation in the political life of the people also. Okay, in this case, the tribal character completely diminished. It's more on the state system and the territorial concepts that emerged over a period of time. That's actually one of the important change that happened from the early Vedic to the later Vedic age. Then we can see that still the democratic patterns or the democratic elements existed here, but the democratic patterns also started to decline gradually because many of the democratic institutions, we saw that some institutions like Sabha, Samiti, Gana, Vidata, Parishad, and those institutions started losing its importance in one way. In another way, we can look at the women were not allowed inside these institutions. Okay, that makes it. But in the early Vedic period, women participated into many institutions here. Okay, then the next important aspect here regarding the stratification of the political institutions, Rashtra emerged as the highest authority or the political unit during a later Vedic period here. The state system became a predominant during this time, and which made a more rigid in nature, here. In consequence of that, the power and prestige of the ruler started to increase, and the ruler and the kingship actually became more hereditary, and the king actually started to perform more yagas like Ashwamedha Yaga, Rajasuya Yaga. Okay, and these yagas and all, he started to follow that, and he practiced that, and he performed that. And by performing those yagas, he is actually establishing the concept of territoriality and the Rashtra. That makes the expansion of the kingdom from the one region to the another region in a very vigorous way here. So in this case, the political institutions further strengthened towards the kingship or the state system during this time here. And the next important thing is actually here, in consequence of the more concept of the prestigious crown and the divine right kingship actually here, the expansion of a bureaucracy we can identify. With the expansion of the bureaucracy during this time, during the later Vedic age, shows us how transformation the political institutions actually happening. The tax collection, because before this period, the early Vedic age, more on a voluntary basis, the people started to provide, like Bali, the voluntary gift to the king. But everything now, it became a permanent, or you have to pay some taxes to them on regular basis here. So this makes a most important contribution or most important changes that happen during a later Vedic age here. So in this case, we can identify it was more on a democratic setup we can identify in the early Vedic age. But when we come to the later Vedic age, we can identify a more transformation that the political institutions come across during this period of time. Okay, so I hope everyone enjoyed this class here. Okay, thank you.